Q&A period after each presenter, and then a final wrap-up Q&A after all the presenters are finished. Today's moderator will go over the format again shortly. Please specify to which presenter you would like your question directed, just so our moderator can be sure to pose it to the correct presenter and at the appropriate time. At the conclusion of today's webinar, you will receive an evaluation via email. We encourage you to provide feedback so we can continually improve the SSP webinar program. You will also receive a link via email to the recorded broadcast of this webinar and to the slides. Our moderator today is Margaret Reisch. Margaret has been working in scholarly publishing for over 30 years. From editorial assistant to director of publications of a society publisher, with various other stops in between, she is now a consultant in the field. One of her present clients is SSP, where she is in charge of coordinating and overseeing all of SSP's programming. It is now my pleasure to turn the webinar over to Margaret so she can introduce our panel and get us underway. Margaret?
Thank you, Gerald. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Hi, I'm Margaret Reisch, and I have, unbelievably to me, been in the scholarly publishing field for over 30 years. While I have not had what you'd call a planned career, I'm very pleased with where it has taken me. I'll never forget thinking on the day I started one of my favorite jobs, everything you have done till now has prepared you for this day. It was a great feeling. The experience that prepared me was from past jobs, but also the volunteer work I had done for CSE and SSP. There's nothing quite like joining a committee in one of these and other great organizations populated by people at all stages of their careers and listening and learning from the more experienced committee members. Then one day you step up to the plate and you nail a task you volunteered to do, and trust me, you are noticed. Not only is this personally rewarding, but it's the most valuable kind of networking you can do. I am really looking forward to hearing our three presenters tell you about their experiences and offer advice to those of you who are new to scholarly communications or considering it as a career or perhaps well into it, but wondering what the future has in store for you. This is a list of our three presenters. Brian Belleville will cover moving from early to mid-career, developing skills, and creating a plan for advancement. He began his career in New York City publishing in 2003 as a fact-checker for a children's reference publisher. He's been an STM editor since 2007, working solely on medical content. He has degrees in biochemistry and creative writing, and is happy to have found a line of work that aligns with his personal interests. Barbara Myers-Ford will cover the importance of networking and mentoring. She provides professional scholarly publishers, professional societies, associations, and their vendors with advice and technical assistance in management, marketing research, and new product development, as well as operational and strategic planning. Holding a master's degree in science, technology, and public policy, and a bachelor's degree in journalism from George Washington University, Barbara is an adjunct professor in the GWU College of Professional Studies Masters in Publishing. Among her many contributions to the industry, she's one of the founders of the Society for Scholarly Publishing, a past president of the Council of Science Editors, a past member of the Publications Policy Committee of the American Diabetes Association, and currently serves as chair of the CSE Development Committee. Last but not least, Deborah Goshenowitz will cover long-term career planning, emphasizing flexibility. Debbie has worked in academic publishing for 20 years. After serving as an editorial assistant on the American Historical Review, while a graduate student in history at Indiana University, she became a project editor for history reference books at Charles Scribner's Sons, followed by Palgrave Macmillan, where she acquired trade history books. She moved on to work as an acquisitions editor for American History and Law at New York University Press for a decade before accepting a position in 2012 as senior commissioning editor for U.S. and Latin American history at Cambridge University Press. So here's the outline of our webinar on career management. I'm going to take 1 or 2 questions in between each speaker, so please send them in through the question function on your screen. Then at the end, there should be more time for questions, so keep them coming while the speakers are speaking. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Brian.
Hi, thanks, Margaret. This is Brian Belleville. I'm an executive editor in medicine at McGraw-Hill Education here in New York City. I realized after I sent in my bio that I actually started my career at a university press. I had an internship in graduate school with the University of Massachusetts Press. So a couple key things to note about my background, because I think this flavors the presentation to a degree. We all have our own personal experience that we bring. To key things to note, I got started in publishing at 30 years old. I was a little bit older. I started a career in science, went to graduate school, and entered publishing a little bit more mature, so to speak. And my first job after that internship was a fact checker, a job that really no longer exists, and was one that I grew from and really set me on my path today. It was a very unique place to start in publishing. So my objective, real quick, is to identify growth opportunities in your organization and your industry so that you can grow your career. I think analysis and using all this great information that's available to us in our digital world now is a key aspect of career development. There are many paths and many choices, certainly in publishing, and I think I certainly did, and I think many underestimate those choices and paths that may exist for us. Here we see an algorithm. This is a medical algorithm of somewhat complex. This is, believe it or not, for a gunshot wound in the ER. Probably a little bit more complex than you may imagine, more than just say extracting bullet, stop bleeding. Not to compare a gunshot wound to publishing, obviously very different experiences. But here is kind of the maybe an algorithm for our milieu of publishing. It's very complex. There are very many paths which we can choose, and opportunity abounds for us. So I think there's 3 steps to determining a strategy when you're trying to move from early to mid-career. This is a challenging time in which opportunities don't just come about every day. And if you're an editorial assistant or a production associate, I think these tips will apply across any aspect of the publishing environment. But first, you have to ask your questions about yourself. What are your goals? We all have different goals, and we all may want to advance to different places within the publishing environment. Since I started, I was older when I started in publishing, and I had a family quickly after I started. It was very important for me, frankly, to make as much money as possible. I had a family to support, and that was an impact on the decisions that I made. But everyone has different objectives, and when you ask questions like, obviously it's important to be respected in your work environment. A degree of independence when you're starting off, especially for those of us in New York City. You may, an immediate goal would be, I want to have security to live without roommates. You want to be an editor, director of rights and permissions. First, I think it's critical to sit down and start to think about these things. This is kind of similar to, I guess, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We have to decide where on that path do we want to start envisioning ourselves. And then secondly, know your company. This is very critical. All of the companies that we work for are unique and have different objectives, and it's really important to understand your company and understand the motivations of your supervisor. Ask a lot of questions. Talk to coworkers about work and life, And I note here, act locally. By that, I mean many of us have supervisors or staff that are working remotely. In publishing, you can have a staff that's scattered throughout the United States or country. But getting to know those people that are in your office that you know that you can get to know personally is going to be important. Get familiar with the corporate directory and the different jobs that are available, and the organization of your company. LinkedIn is a great resource. Flip through your company, other companies, get a sense of what are people's job titles, where have they been previously, where they're at now, how their job titles may have changed over the years. Seek to know what others have done before you, and how did they get to where they are. And this will be the beginning of your chance to identify and seize opportunity at your company by knowing the most possible about where people have been and are going around you. Thirdly, know your industry. I'm very active on Twitter. It's something I started probably about a year ago, not so much to be social, but for gathering intelligence. And I recommend starting with the SSP Twitter feed, @ScholarlyPub, you see there. If you subscribe to that feed and look at who they're following, real quickly you'll have 20, 30 different companies, individuals that you can follow that are going to provide really great intelligence on this specific scholarly publishing industry. And in the same way that LinkedIn can help you learn about your company, it can help you learn about your industry. Blogs and websites like the Scholarly Kitchen put out by SSP are great resources. Online forums that might be specifically related to, say I'm in medicine, so I go into a lot of medical forums. Societies like SSP, PSP. Admittedly, it's difficult to travel to meetings if you're just beginning. There may not be funds for that, but webinars like this would be a great place to start to get to know your societies. And as I noted before, the importance of this being seek to know what others have done before you. How did they get to where they are? And you might see some trends. Or some directions that, or meet some mentors within your company or industry. Now, it's important to note that there are many trends in scholarly publishing that you've probably already identified many of these, and as you begin to research your company and your industry at whole, these I think are the primary things, and there are many others not listed here that are shaping our industry today. The digital movement is enormous. Processes and product, ebooks, subscription websites, all of these things are changing our industry like never before. As are social networks, the need to be mobile, as in delivering content to phones, and an increase in data and analytics. Job titles are changing rapidly. At my company, for instance, we don't even use the term editor really anymore. We call editors brand managers. At Elsevier, the term editor has often been replaced with a content strategist. So there's, this is an interesting development where people's job descriptions and responsibilities are changing pretty rapidly. There's a massive increased reliance on outside vendors. This has been going on for 10 years. If you can identify an opportunity in your organization to work with outside vendors and you do that very well, that could be a place for you. Institutional subscriptions are the game in my industry, specifically medical publishing and much of scholarly publishing. For example, if you're in sales, you might want to look at how the growth has been for your unit within institutional subscription sales and someone who's maybe a liaison with Amazon.com. These are trends that significantly could impact opportunity for you, as is globalization, looking how your company supports the global effort and where positions may be open and growing concerning selling content across the world. And the open access movement, especially for anyone in the journal world, is a real and growing opportunity. But that said, in the world in which everything is increasing in the online space at a rapid pace, we want to be careful and not go overboard here. So, I don't think it's wise to walk into the office with your brand new Google Glass. No need to demand a 3D printer. Think in moderation and wisely about how we present ourselves. And so that leads to the question, how do you present yourself in order to make that jump from early to mid-career. It's important to have a story to tell, and by story I don't mean fiction, but just a message that you get across that's somewhat succinct about what you've done and what you've accomplished at your job. I recommend identifying a couple of projects that you've taken ownership of and excelled at. I think it's important to become an expert at something specific. This is often difficult, say if you're an editorial assistant where you're forced to become a jack of all trades, it may seem, and maybe you don't have the opportunity to take on big projects. I would seek out those things wherever possible. It's not, well, I should admit that I think I was lucky that I started my career as a fact checker because it allowed me to focus on a specific task, really, and I got to know a wide group of people locally at my company, and I became known for doing this specific thing really well, and that allowed me to advance to an editor after only, I think, 7 or 8 months at the job, which is really important because that fact checker job would have been dead, obsolete within probably a year after that, simply because fact checking just wasn't in the cards anymore in terms of our shifting budgets. Make sure you have measurable goals and that you exceed them. There's nothing more important than having measurable goals and making sure that when people reflect on what you've accomplished that it's clear and objective. Real quickly, I just want to go over some 4 common traits that I think I've identified of a successful publishing professional. Curiosity is bolded here. No doubt in my mind, that's the #1 thing that I look for in colleagues, let alone people that I may manage. But this is a unique industry. It's very niche. When I find people that share my curiosity about how the industry works, that's a huge plus. It's rare to find someone that's excited about scholarly publishing, and I am, and I want to know that others share that excitement also. Real quickly, because I think I'm running out of time here, but I wanted to touch on bailout strategies versus growth strategies. Of course, we want to focus on growth, and you want to identify those opportunities for you, and then act on those opportunities. Often you may find that it's difficult to advance if you wait around for someone to leave a position and you have the opportunity to fill that position. So lateral moves and job hopping, although that's maybe not the best term to use for moving to a new company, are realistic strategies in publishing. But we want to be cautious. You want to ask, what is your motivation? Are you escaping a difficult situation, a difficult manager, or you're just unhappiness and moving to another job really because you feel the need to just move on? Those types of moves, which are more kind of, you might think the grass is greener somewhere else, are often not effective. But if you've identified this move is necessary because it affords you a better growth opportunity. For example, you're going to move in toward your company because a sales position has opened up in institutional sales, or a new opportunity is there in institutional sales, and you had previously been someone who goes around to meetings and tries to sell print books. That might be a legitimate opportunity for you to make a lateral move. And the same thing applies to job hopping. Just look at your motivations really closely. Know that if you're escaping what you deem to be a bad situation, there's some risk there that those same issues may crop up when you move to a new job. So real quickly, a summary of what we've talked about here. But I believe that a thorough and constant analysis of your company and industry, and then acting on those findings, will increase your odds of being in the right place at the right time so that you can grow your career. And this is, I think, an important thing to note here. When I reflect on my experience, or when I do some analysis of my company, there's no doubt that it seems like a lot of people were in the right place at the right time. In other words, maybe they kind of got lucky. And there is an aspect of chance in our advancement in publishing, but you can control that to a degree by understanding where those opportunities may exist and where they may grow. And it all starts, I think, with being curious about your job and investing the time into becoming an expert. Thanks all for the time. And now I'm going to I think we go ahead and start some questions.
Yes, Brian, thank you so much. That was really informative, and I do have a couple of questions that have come in. One is that you mentioned SSP and PSP, and someone's asked what PSP stands for.
Sure, I believe it stands for Professional and Scholarly Publishing Society. I believe that the PSP is a little more expansive in its membership. For example, at McGraw-Hill, we're more of a professional publisher, so we don't do journals. We're less scholarly, even though we overlap with scholarly publishing. So the PSP is going to branch out a little bit more into the more commercial publishers. I even think some trade publishers may have a presence there to some degree also. But these two societies, they certainly overlap. Both are great resources.
Yeah, I think I would summarize it that way too. Also, they are their membership is by organization. So if you have a job at an organization that belongs to the PSP, they may send you to the meeting. But whereas SSP individuals can become members of SSP. So I have one other question, because we do have another, just like 3 more minutes, Brian, and that is, can you talk a little bit about some of the skills valued by publishers?
Sure, absolutely. So that's, it's going to be specific to your publisher and your position. I tried, curiosity, I mentioned, isn't necessarily a specific skill, but that's something that you can try to emphasize and frankly, grow and develop whatever your position is. The other thing that I think is a real development now. I mean, so this is a business. For all of us, whether you're in a nonprofit or a more commercial publisher like I am, but the industry more than ever, I think, is analytical. They're concerned about data. They're concerned about the bottom line more than ever. If you're an analytical person, if you can handle a lot of data and make evidence-based decisions based on numbers and research, I think that puts you in a good place in our industry now. I've seen some change in the last 20 years where individuals that show good evidence for their decisions that are based on research and can present that justification for the decisions that they make are advancing. While the Uber editor, who's just this amazing content expert, still hugely valuable. But if that editor has difficulty with technology, that can be a complication. So being analytical. Of course, having a great skill in the digital environment. Those things are gonna help you in the long run and the short term. I'd certainly love to open, if it's possible, to open up that question to the rest of the panel. I'd love to hear others' thoughts.
2 minutes. If anybody else has something they'd like to add.
I mean, I'll answer from an acquisitions point of view, and what I'm saying might be a touch different from Brian. While I completely agree that technological literacy is key, instincts and a passion for those instincts is absolutely key for acquisitions. From the time you need to be out there getting people excited about writing something for you, to pitching it to an editorial board and then to a sales team, and that's always been something I've carried with me for 20 years.
And I'll toss in another few that I think will be very helpful, and that is to have some basic understanding of finances, and most especially, we are in publishing, good written communication skills are very helpful, and as well as honing your presentation skills.
That's great. Thank you, everyone. I think now we'll switch over to Barbara's presentation. And keep those questions coming. Hopefully we will have time at the end for more questions.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I've been serving the professional and scholarly information communities for over 40 years now. And like Brian, those years have been in a career I hadn't planned on. My undergraduate degree was in science journalism, as Margaret mentioned, at a time when few reporters had any real understanding of scientific issues and research. And my master's degree in science policy analysis and technology assessment came at a time when the position of science advisor at a state level was just coming into vogue. But as you can see, those careers did not materialize because other opportunities popped up along the way. Like Margaret, I started out as an editorial assistant and worked my way up. One important lesson that I learned early on is one will never regret having said yes to a new opportunity. One only regrets having said no and not knowing whether that new path should have been taken. So over my decades in publishing, I have found that mentoring and networking can best be viewed as symbiotic in how one should approach using them throughout one's career. Throughout my career, I have had the personal philosophy of you take from the land, you give to the land. After the webinar, I ask if you have time to download my slide set to read the notes on this slide and the next. If I go through them, that will be the end of my time on the panel. But they are at the crux of what has been a wonderful time in publishing. Or you can drop me an email and I'll be happy to share my experiences with you personally. But for now, I'm going to slide through to mentoring. To start, the important thing is to make mentoring and networking a part of your professional life, not just occasional activities. Unless you incorporate them into how you go about interacting with people at all levels on basically a daily basis, when you do have opportunities, your efforts may seem forced and awkward versus comfortable and natural. Now, many organizations have formal mentoring programs. One mentoring guru, Bonnie McKenzie, who's author of the book Friends in High Places, outlined such a program, as you see here, as being planned by an employer to match a mentor and a mentee with the goal of accelerating a mentee's career. And there's a lot of formal attributes. Flash mentoring is a recent concept that involves brief or one-time encounters between a junior and senior professional. Such encounters are considered coaching sessions where the junior professional gains leadership development skills from the senior. Amanda Harrington, a researcher based in the UK, is known for her examination of informal networking, and she defines one of the types quite succinctly, and I quote, "The use of e-mentoring and e-coaching, that is, mentoring or coaching via email, is increasing in an environment where many forms of computer-assisted learning are becoming widespread. Computer-based training, interactive training programs, and materials that can be downloaded from the internet. The forms of computer-assisted learning are many." Even in our GW master's program in publishing, We now simultaneously teach in the classroom and also do online as well. One final example of informal mentoring began at the turn of this century. First popularized by former GE Chairman Jack Welch, reverse mentoring, as explained by Alan Weber, co-founder of the magazine Fast Company, is, quote, a situation where the old fogies in an organization realize that by the time you're in your 40s and 50s, you're not in touch with the future the same way as the young 20-somethings. They come with fresh eyes, open minds, and instant links to the technology of our future, unquote. Well, we already see much of this going on all around us, and like the pace of technological change, I expect reverse mentoring to increase exponentially as well. No, these aren't the rules of some dating service, but there is no question that any relationship certainly goes through various stages from beginning to end. But like any special relationship, there are a few things one should keep in mind. Now, because you wouldn't have anyone in your organization to fall back on, I'm going to look at the 4 stages from the perspective of informal mentoring. In the beginning, mentors and mentees, not sure I really like that word, usually come together either because the mentees are searching for individuals they respect and think of as good role models, or the mentors are looking for people with potential, or both, and if the stars align, they meet. I think of this as a true serendipitous life experience, as both of you are seeking a positive relationship worth the energy required by good mentoring. And in fact, nearly all of my mentor relationships, both as the mentor or the mentee, have been that kind. Goals and expectations aren't articulated formally, but they come about as a result of the learning and development that's part of the act of mentoring. A good mentor from outside your organization will help you thrive and survive based on the personal bond you've achieved. Also, the achievement of goals comes about from your absorption of lessons learned through the mentor's experience and expertise. Ending a mentoring relationship isn't as final as one might presume. There are reasons for the mentor-mentee connection to dissolve. Usually, it is that the mentee has nothing left to learn or wants to flex new muscles. Sometimes the mentor thinks it's time for the mentee to progress more independently. One hopes that the two agree so as to avoid a stressful situation. What would be the best of all worlds, however, is for the mentoring relationship to evolve into one of peer-to-peer, or perhaps even a professional or social friendship, if appropriate. The initial focus of the relationship has moved on. Mentor and mentee are now unique individuals in each other's networks. I've taken the definition of networking from yourdictionary.com, mainly because I like the examples provided for people versus computers. And I quote, "Networking is defined as the act of making contact and exchanging information with other people, groups, and institutions to develop mutually beneficial relationships, such as handing out your business card in a social event which is designed to provide opportunities for new business collaborations, such as exchanging contact information with people who have similar interests on such things as the LinkedIn groups that Brian mentioned, such as sharing and acquiring information between different company divisions and departments to solve a particular business problem." So let's take a slightly closer look at people networking. The concepts of how people interact have been evolving with the new communication technologies. But at the very heart of our communications and connections lies a concept that we learned as children, that of friendship. My husband and I have both had careers which brought us into contacts with thousands of people. But the lion's share of these individuals didn't even make the cut to be considered acquaintances. Those thousands are not in our network. Our networks are made up of allies and acquaintances. When I thought about my network for this webinar, I could easily name the few true allies I've made over the years. They're like professional best friends who care about you enough to tell you the truth and come bail you out at 4 a.m. if need be. The rest are acquaintances, to varying degrees to be sure, but while many, they are far more special and important than the thousands of others one meets in their life. The strength to this group is that they're diverse. Our connection is more than just a casual conference conversation or quick email. Just like friendship, we have the few with a capital F that are our true allies, but we also have many other friends who are also important in our lives. When you consider your network, how would you describe the individuals who comprise it? So, what this brief look at mentoring and networking set out to give you was some basic concepts to guide you along your way to all the new places you'll go. Learn to notice that opportunity to do something you'd never have expected or hoped to do. As you plan, so shall you succeed. But don't set yourself up for failure. As Brian was saying, it's important to know your strengths and weaknesses so you'll be focused on the right goal. But most of all, enjoy. My dad gave me the best piece of career advice. When you don't want to get out of bed in the morning, ask yourself why. I followed his advice. When I overslept my alarm for too long, I would start looking for another job. And each one took me to places I'd never dreamed I would go. Thanks for listening. Best wishes for success. Please be in touch. Margaret?
Thank you so much, Barbara, and we're so glad that you got up on time to do this webinar with us. I have a question for you, and it involves the kind of networking you would do at conferences. Someone's asked, how do I join groups or attend industry conferences if my company does not support my going?
Well, the first thing I think of is the fact that SSP has a scholarship for students and young professionals to go to the annual meeting. And that's certainly something I encourage all my students and young career people to apply for, and keep my fingers crossed that I see some familiar faces each year. The other thing is you might talk with your boss and see when was that policy first instituted. Perhaps it's time for a review and they just hadn't realized it. And finally, there might be some specific sessions at the annual meeting where they're really relevant and current with regards to what's going on in your publishing operation at the moment. And the two of you can make a very good case for having you attend. Now, if they're still rather adamant about not having you go to the larger annual meetings and conferences, perhaps you can engage in webinars such as these, or perhaps there's a one-day seminar nearby that won't be as expensive. And finally, we see more and more of the vendors putting on events that are much lower cost or oftentimes free. And so those are all great places for you to network, for you to possibly meet the next mentor in your life. Good luck.
Thanks, Barbara. And we have 2 more minutes, and someone has asked, how do I politely ask someone to be my mentor when they always seem so busy?
Well, the busiest people are usually the ones most willing to help. At least that's been my experience. It's kind of awkward to just wander over to someone and ask them to be a mentor. I think what you really want to do is create that comfortable and natural experience that I spoke about in my remarks. I never asked anyone to be my mentor. Those things happened because we were seeing each other at conferences, we were serving on committees, and it's a matter of being willing to give of yourself and your time just as much as they are. In the old days, we used to close down the bars. That's not exactly PC anymore, but still, I think at most of the annual meetings, you'll see people maybe just not drinking as much as they used to, but still sitting in the lounges, sitting in the various areas where one can have a conversation, and, you know, do make yourself available for those times. It means so much to walk up to a group table at lunch or dinner and sit down where you don't know anyone at the table. So you need to introduce yourself. And those are the kinds of serendipitous things that will help bring new people into your life.
Can I just step in for 1 minute? I would say for any people who are part of the University Press Committee, the AUP, Association for American University Presses, they really value mentoring both at their annual meeting and through other networks. So if your press is a member of the AUP, you can join for free, and I urge you to do so.
Great. Okay, well, Debbie, I think we're ready to move on to you, and please do keep those questions coming. Hopefully we'll have some time at the end to answer more.
Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, you just want to click from beginning.
Great. Okay, here we go. So I am going to take this conversation a little bit further and talk about long-term career planning, be it publishing or something related or perhaps not related to publishing. And I'm going to focus on 3 things to remember as you're thinking about a long-term career in publishing: flexibility, open eyes, and timing. I'll be coming back to these, but these are bullet points to keep in mind. So Margaret gave you my brief bio. I have had a long-term career in publishing, which betrays that I'm very much older than I'd like to think I am. But it was somewhat windy. I thought I was going to be a history professor. I've always loved history, and was on well into writing a dissertation in history, and then, as Margaret said, I happened to get a job at a journal, a very prestigious journal for the history profession, where I was doing my graduate work, and I jumped at the opportunity and liked it so much that I sort of listened. I talked about instincts before in one of the questions. I listened to my instincts and said, you know, I really think this is what I'd rather do, and I think I'd be better at it than being a professor. So I left academia, and I was, it feels young now, but I was 28 when I did that, older than some people start in publishing. So I was really focused on just getting some publishing experience on my resume quickly. I happened to move out of the country for personal reasons, and I knew I wanted to be an academic book editor. That wasn't in the cards where I was living, so I got the first editorial job that came around, and that was at a magazine for insurance brokers. Could not be further from what I wanted to do, but it was a true learning experience. I learned everything about publishing, from writing to editing to advertising to production. So I still think back to that job that I had in the 90s about learning the nuts and bolts of the industry. After a few years there, I sort of went back to my original path, and I said, all right, I still want to edit history. I think I'd like to do commercial history. I didn't have job experience in trade editing, but I did manage to get a job doing history reference books. So again, I knew what I wanted, but I also said, well, if I can get a job editing the subject that I like, I'm going to take it. And then I said, all right, I still want to edit history, but I think to sort of combine my academic background plus what I can do, I'd be best at a university press. I was lucky enough to get a job at a university press doing history, but I also had to edit law. I did not want to edit law, and I'm sorry if I offend any listeners who either study or edit law, but it came with the job, and I wasn't going to sacrifice a job in history for because I didn't want to edit in a certain field. So 10 years later, an opportunity came my way, which is my current position at Cambridge, just doing history. So I wasn't necessarily planning to leave, but it was the opportunity that I had wanted for close to 2 decades, so I took it. And, you know, on the one hand, I thought, I've arrived. But, you know, I've had several jobs in the last 20 years, so I'm not sure this will be my last one either. So that's my long career in publishing. All of those steps have been marked by flexibility and a willingness to embrace the entire publishing industry, be it genre of publishing, whether it's journals or books, to subject I'm editing. I myself have not embraced it as fully as others. I've always been an editor, but I know many people, some of the best editors I know started out in sales or in marketing, so the more flexible you can be, the better. You should also accept tasks that may fall outside of what you think your job is, or perhaps even what that says on paper. Brian mentioned being technologically literate. Again, something I am not, but in this changing environment, the better you are with technology. If somebody asks you to be part of a focus group on a digital project, even if you think you're a print editor or do something else in print, I would recommend to jump at it, because you don't know what that might lead to in the future, because publishing is always in a state of flux. My colleagues on this panel have already talked about that state of flux, but the more tasks that you become literate at and the more types of genres you worked on over the course of your career will position you, you'll be in a better position to embrace change as the industry continues to change. And regardless of what you are doing, you're going to learn from it. I mentioned before my first real editing job, I worked with insurance brokers, and I still learned valuable lessons about putting together a product from that job that I learned nowhere else as a history editor. So my next bullet point is keeping your eyes very open. And this covers a lot of ground that Barbara and Brian mentioned. You should attend industry conferences, whether it's the AUP, as I mentioned, the SSP, any conference that you can attend that will expose you to folks in publishing. Go there if you can. But it's important not to necessarily confuse them with job fairs. These are networking opportunities. You probably are not going to get a job out of it, but you may very well make valuable contacts that will help you pursue other jobs in the future. Again, going back to Barbara said, do seek out mentors, and the best relationships often stem up pretty organically, but don't confuse them with hiring managers. My mentor, she's been my mentor for probably about 14 years, and I will never work for her for all the right reasons, and I seek her for advice, not for jobs. when you are interviewing for other jobs, you always need to be prepared to take that job. Sometimes the temptation is to interview something that you might not want that badly, but an opportunity comes your way, and you might think, well, you know, I'll get a counteroffer for my current position. Never assume that. So really think carefully about what jobs you're interviewing and why you are interviewing for them. And finally, have a plan B that that may be something that you never thought you'd be doing in publishing, or perhaps even outside of publishing. I have lots of friends who I met in print publishing back in the dinosaur days. One of them is in advertising, one of them is a real estate agent, a couple of them have gone into university administration. You know, one of the questions back at Brian's presentation was, you know, what do publishers look for in a job? And I think everything we said, all those skills, be it passion or technological literacy or attention to detail, all of that will behoove you in whatever next step you take. And finally, timing is truly everything. The point of entry can happen at any point. Some people enter publishing based on an internship they might have had in high school, and others enter in their 30s, 40s, 50s. I do know some people in their 60s who have entered, so a lot of it's about timing. And then I talked about job interviews in my previous slide. Saying no to a job offer that you receive doesn't mean anything is closed, because the timing might not be right. I was offered a job at NYU Press 2 years before I went there. I wanted very much to go there, but it wasn't a right time for me to move in my career. I wanted some important publications that I had acquired to be published. And I was lucky enough that the person they hired left after a couple years, and then I went on to stay there 10 years. So doors are rarely closed to you. And that being said, a decade at a job can be good, but 14 months may be the right time too. Again, keep your eyes open, know when to stay, know when to go. And publishing professionals, I compared them to cats. I think all of us who have been in the industry for a long time are always delighted and surprised at who pops up where. I have colleagues who I worked with 20 years ago, and I see them at other presses in other industries. So there are a lot of opportunities if you play your cards right and are a nice person and foster genuine and healthy relationships in the industry, because one thing I've learned in 20 years is that it's a very open, friendly industry, and people keep other people in mind when jobs open up. And that is about it. I think questions would probably be more fruitful at this point than me just talking.
Thank you so much, Debbie, for sharing. I just got a question that I really like for you to answer, and then I'll go back to some of the other questions that have come in for the rest of the panel to answer. And the question is, what % of the job description should match your skills before you apply for that job? I know this questioner goes on to say, I know it's important to not be afraid of jobs that might seem out of your range.
Right. I would say, I don't want to put it into a hard percent, but you know, usually in job ads you see there are 5 bullet points that they say this is absolutely required. That matters. And then often they'll have another paragraph saying, this would help, this would help, this is attractive. You know, I think you really want to focus on meeting the requirements, which are often, okay, you know, if you're going for an acquisitions job, they will sometimes say you need 3 to 5 years as an acquisitions editor. It would help to have that. If you're going for trade publishing, sometimes you need trade experience. You know, journal experience may not work. You know, so I would say focus on the main requirements, which are rarely subtly presented in job ads, and then see if you can tie the other ones artfully and honestly to the main requirements. And be honest about salary requirements too. Most jobs do ask for salary requirements. If you don't put it down, sometimes that means that your application may go into the discard bin. So put them down and try to be honest, because you know, some recruiting firms or HR people do check salary records.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, panelists, unmute your mics. I have a few more questions that have come in. They're excellent. One of them is, what is your advice for finding balance between working hard to learn and get ahead and not getting burned out? Good question, right?
I can take that, but I just talked, so please, Brian or Barbara, if you want to take it, please go first.
No, Debbie, if you have an answer, go for it.
I mean, you know, it's somewhat cheesy, but, you know, publishing, you know, a lot of people aren't in it for the huge dollars. I know that, you know, Brian, you know, all of us needed to get in it and make a living, but we do it because we love what we're creating, you know, and I would think if that starts to seem like something you don't like, then it might be time to start thinking about what else you want to do. If you find that you are just motoring through and, you know, because you want to move up, but the passion isn't there or the love isn't there, it's going to show in the results.
I totally agree with Debbie. The reason I didn't want to answer it is because every so many years I do burn myself out because I love what I do. And so sometimes it overwhelms me, but for me, it works.
Yeah, I can relate as well. I'm going to switch gears and go to a sort of a more very specific question, and it's about the use of LinkedIn. And the question is, in the skills section of LinkedIn, is it worth having people endorse you? Sometimes they endorse you for things you've never done. Is it better to just turn that setting off?
This is Brian. Since I touched on LinkedIn in my presentation, it feels appropriate for me to tackle this one. I wouldn't turn that off. I don't put a huge amount of value into people's LinkedIn page. I use LinkedIn more as a information source, as an analytical tool. But, you know, I have glanced at a LinkedIn page for people that have applied for positions before. And, you know, a healthy LinkedIn page, one that has, you know, 500 plus connections, lots of endorsements, and someone that also endorses other people, and that's more often going to reflect favorably than negatively. I don't think that's something that I would turn off, unless people are, you know, you're worried that it's going to be inappropriate. But I haven't seen that happen.
I agree with Brian, and I think it's one of those reciprocal kinds of acts of random kindness that go on between colleagues as well, because it's the luck of the draw whether someone pops up in your little space to give some kind of endorsement to. Oftentimes colleagues will do it mainly as kind of a, hi there, thinking about you and wanted to let the world know I think you're a really fine professional. So I wouldn't turn it off either. There's more good than not in that particular area.
Great. And here's one last question, because we have 2 more minutes for the entire panel, and that is, in addition to job titles changing, are job duties changing as well?
Yes. You know, I think we're really moving to content, and this goes back to the digital part, I mean, a lot of publishers are wondering about the future of print books or whole books and thinking about how to, as we're told, to curate content. And I think everybody who's thinking about publishing has to think about both, the whole. It's still important. I will always believe that, but the parts are going to be more and more important, and the way we look at parts and what we do with them and what we think is of value in terms of parts versus a whole is something that no one can ignore anymore.
And I think our jobs are going to be parallel with how things move in terms of technology and the way readers and researchers are using our materials. I think we have to be ready to do more than the traditional, and oftentimes it's up to us. I've been fortunate enough to have people hire me to create programs. If you have that opportunity, boy, jump for it, because it affords you such a fabulous learning experience, and a lot of that happens in the new digital environment.
That is all excellent, and I want to thank our panelists once again. I think we are out of time, but if you have other questions, I think you can reach out via email and get them answered by the panelists. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you, Margaret, and thank you to our panelists as well, and to all of you in attendance. We thank you for taking the time to not only participate in this webinar, but to also take the time for yourself to ponder your career and where it can take you. So again, as I opened the session with, we will send you an email with a link to an evaluation form. We'd like your feedback so we can continue to improve the program. And you'll also get a link to where the slides are if you want to go back and refer to them. So with that, our webinar session today is concluded. Enjoy the rest of your day, and wherever your career takes you, just remember to enjoy the ride. Thanks.